Welcome to the Library of Congress. I'm Shari Werb, the director of the Center for Learning, Literacy, and Engagement. Before I introduce tonight's special guest, I want to let you know about our new program initiative called Live at the Library. Every Thursday evening, we keep the library open until 8:30 p.m. with drinks and snacks for purchase. Our exhibits are open, and we offer various programs, including concerts, films, and performances. We often pull out special collections, such as the flutes Lizzo played here at the library. And tonight, we have a small exhibit in the lobby of the auditorium featuring the library's collections related to Filipino history and its citizens' fight for free expression. If you didn't get a chance to see it on your way in, you'll be able to see it on your way out. We look forward to seeing you back here on Thursday evenings. For tonight's program, we're honored to host Ms. Ressa, and we're glad you're all here with us tonight. I want to thank our library's Asian American Association and the Asian Division for their help in producing this event. Ms. Ressa is the CEO, co-founder, and president of Rappler, the Philippines' top digital news site, and was the co-recipient of the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize. She grew up in the United States and studied at Princeton University before working as a journalist in Asia for over 35 years. She won the UNESCO World Press Freedom Prize in 2021 and was the Time Magazine Person of the Year in 2018. Among many awards, she received the prestigious Golden Pen of Freedom Award from the World Association of Newspapers and News Publishers. The library's Chief Communications Officer, Roswell Encina, will be in conversation tonight with Ms. Ressa, whose new book is titled How to Stand Up to a Dictator, The Fight for Our Future. After the event, Ms. Ressa will be signing books at the information desk located right after you entered this building. There will be time for questions from the audience tonight, so be thinking about your questions. Let's welcome our author and special guest, Ms. Ressa, with Roswell Encina.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Library of Congress. Thank you, Shari. Also want, as Shari mentioned, I want to thank the LOC's Asian American Staff Association for helping us support tonight's event. I hope you were able to look at the collection display out there in the vestibule. You'll see items from the People Power that came from the library's rare books collection, from the music division, and many more. So I'm hoping you could enjoy that right after the conversation. And welcome to Maria Ressa. How are you?
I'm good, I'm good. Oh my gosh, you guys must be nerds here at the Library of Congress on a Saturday night. So thank you.
So as you can see, I'm a big nerd. You know, I completely tabbed the book.
You gotta love it, right? You read.
So I should say though, the book is like your memoir is an ode to
Memoir
friendship.
sounds so old, but yes, I am old.
It's an ode to journalism, to democracy, to Filipinos. In the prologue, actually, and this is what hit me a lot, you ask the readers, what are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? How do you answer that question? And through your book tour and talking to people, how have they answered that question?
Oh my gosh, he starts with a tough one. I think I've learned a ton. Like, we all think we have values, we do the right thing, but you don't really know until you're tested. And, you know, for good or, whether it's good or not, or bad, President Duterte tested us. And what am I willing to sacrifice? I'm learning I'm willing to sacrifice a lot more than I ever thought I would. And that it's extremely important. And I think from the audiences that I've been on this kind of book tour. It started in November 17th in London. And then here now, I feel like we're learning from the audiences, you're just finding out you're being manipulated. And that to me was kind of shocking. But everyone feels something is wrong. And so I asked that same question, what are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? And it's interesting to ask it in Washington, D.C., you know?
So we share a similar story. You know, full disclosure, I'm Filipino-American. I was born there, then my family moved here to the States, then we moved back, then we moved back. So you kind of have the same thing. How did your dual citizenship or having two countries considered home affect you personally, and how did it inspire your career as a journalist?
Oh my gosh. When I was growing up in the States, so I was born in the Philippines, and then I was 10 years old when we landed in snowy New Jersey, and well, New York, then drove to New Jersey. I guess I always thought that when I was growing up, I was a nerd, and it wasn't cool to be a nerd back then. And I thought that, you know, I was just a quiet kid. And I thought maybe I'm Filipino, you know, that I might fit better in the Philippines. And so when I graduated college, I applied for a Fulbright, and I went back to the Philippines. And when I got there, that's when I realized, oh gosh, I don't have the cultural signals of what being Filipino meant. So the longer I stayed in the Philippines, I've now lived more of my life in the Philippines than in the US. When I'm with Filipinos, I feel very American. And then when I'm with Americans, I feel very Filipino. So I don't know if you feel the same way, but you know what it does is you're part of both. I think any third culture kid would feel this. You're part of both, but sometimes you're part of neither. And then I always said it was great training to be a reporter, because you pull back, and then you can jump in, but there's always a side that's going, you know, what is really happening? I've learned to put the best of both together, I think. That's the fun part. And this is part of what I wrote. Like, people kept asking me, where do you find courage? And it's actually layer by layer by layer. It's in the values that you grow up with. It's in the choices that you make. And so, yeah, Filipino and American. Yes, I'm glad. When he walked in, like, we had never met each other, I was like, are you Filipino?
I have to ask you too. You know, you went to school in Princeton. Do you consider yourself like an accidental journalist? You know, like most Filipino parents, many of our parents are probably aiming for us to do something else.
Medical school.
Yes.
Doctor.
What was your
lawyer.
what was your light bulb moment that you realized, this is what I need to do?
I think when I went back to the Philippines, I mean, I slid into it, you know, and I always used to crack a joke that I didn't call it left brain, right brain in college. If you're in college and you're trying to figure out what to do, you know, in the book I really say there's this one thing, which is always choose the path to learn. Choose to learn whichever path you're doing, and then, you know, shift if you stop learning at something. But for me, it was, I did all the right things. My parents said, go pre-med. I was pre-med, so I just collapsed it in 2 years instead of the 4 years, and then I did English and theater and dance. Then they said, do pre-law, so I did pre-law in the 1 year. And then after the Fulbright, it was the Fulbright where it was for political theater. My senior thesis, I wrote a play, and it was a Brechtian allegory, because I like sorting out my personal problems in allegories. So it was there was a mother figure who was the Aquino figure, and then a grandmother figure, the Marcos figure, fighting over a child for the Filipino people. So this was the senior thesis that went to Edinburgh, to the Fringe Festival, the International Festival there. And when I got to the Philippines, it was real life political theater, literally. And I wanted to learn, but theater wasn't the right way. So I walked into the old government television station where the journalists were learning how to unlearn their own self-censorship, right? Because they had come out of almost 21 years of a dictatorship. And I just, like every day, that's how I learned, through television news. And I kind of fell into it. And then yeah, I didn't really choose it. You fall into it. You make the choice every day, and I was choosing where I was learning. And journalism was incredible. You get to ask anyone questions, and imagine like heads of state will answer, and inevitably you find it was an incredible thrill. I mean, this is what it is, a love of journalism, which I hope survives.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Which led to you working to CNN. You worked in the Philippines at the network in the Philippines, which is called ABS-CBN, which turned into, you were able to get a great opportunity at CNN, where you covered a lot of awful war zones. How did that prepare you in covering, it's not like the usual type of war zone in the Philippines, but how did the war zones of other countries prepare you to what you had to do in the Philippines? I like what you wrote when you said, when you were covering Suharto. When there was a challenge to power, the leader tried to shape the narrative by controlling the press. So it kind of almost kind of created the foundation for you of how to approach covering the Filipino government.
I mean, in every level, right? Like you go to any country where a coup happens, the first step is to take the television station or the radio station, and then control communications and get your message out. That is for everything. But I think, living a breaking news life, being a broadcast reporter, I think it was the golden age of journalism. And you're forced to when you go into a conflict area, war zone reporting, you take your team. That means you plan your way in and then you plan your way out. And then regardless of what happens, even if they're shooting from that side to this side and you're live, you can't duck. You just keep going live. And then the part I like best, which is the best training for things like what we're doing today, you have 2 minutes at most to distill 400 years of history and the present moment, and you have to do it in 3 bullet points. That was my 20-year training. So, it was, I guess part of it is making those judgments. That was the other thing. Like, it made me realize that you have to be prepared. When you're live, you're asked these questions about, the Philippines or East Timor, which was coming out of 400 years of Portuguese rule. And it was, you have to put it in the present moment. You take the history, but bring it and somehow make it relevant to why you should care about what's happening there now. So, yeah, sorry, I rambled onto that.
Let me test you on that, actually.
Go!
For members of the audience and for the folks watching online who may not know, you mentioned a lot, Rodrigo Duterte. Who is he? The statistics are staggering, I should say, on his war on drugs. In the first couple years of his administration, about 27,000 people were killed.
All of this is debatable.
And he compares himself to Hitler.
Yes, proudly so, he does. And
so give us your spiel of how would you tell this audience who Duterte is in 3 bullet points.
Oh my gosh. Longest serving mayor of Davao City from 1988 until he ran for president, on and off, time off. He was a vigilante mayor who was often accused of extrajudicial killings. And he, in the interview we did right before he decided to run for office, admitted on camera to me that he had killed 3 people. Number 3, right? He killed 3 people, and it's actually what, that clip was picked up by everyone else. He believed in order to lead, you need both fear and violence. And he carried through. He gave he fulfilled that promise.
I mean, it's pretty horrible. Like the night of his election, people started dying. And could you describe to the folks when they would kill, let's say, a drug lord or someone who sells drugs, what would they do?
Well, for one, it was never really the people who were the power, right? It was inevitably, and Amnesty International said this in their report in January 2017, it is always the poorest of the poor. It looked like a war on the poor. But what they did is, there were, starting July of 2016, June, July 2016, we had one reporter at night who would go out with a camera, and every night they began coming home with videos of at least 8 dead bodies a night. And this would be like bodies dumped on the sidewalk, sometimes in front of a school. The bodies would be hog-tied. They would be gaffer taped, and sometimes their eyes blindfolded, and there would be a cardboard saying "Wag tularan," which is "Don't imitate me." Right? It was like you couldn't write this better as fiction, except Gotham City was real for us, and I think it crept up on us. You know, we were counting 8 dead bodies, but at a certain point, the Philippine National Police actually admitted that during that time period, at least 33 people died every night. You don't feel a cataclysmic change when this happens. This is why I started calling it death by 1,000 cuts. It changes reality slowly. It normalizes violence, but you don't realize how much it changes you.
Some people may think, especially here in the States, how could somebody like that be elected to be president?
Well, I should ask you.
I'm the Philippines, that it is. So, to give the audience an example, what kind of narrative did Duterte put out there for the Filipinos to digest?
It's the same thing that strongman ruler have used in every part of the world. There's almost a dictator's playbook. It is tough on crime. It is not rule of law, but rule by law. It is he gave 3 promises. He said that he's going to stop corruption. That didn't happen. He was going to stop drugs. That also didn't happen. But they were all, it was quite concerted. You know, this is why it's so directly connected to our information ecosystem, because during the time he was campaigning for president, the drugs, which became a problem everywhere, I think, around the same time, right? Drugs moved from a number 8 nationwide concern to number 1. And that was part of it, right? He promised that Filipinos would feel safer. Yeah.
I think he even said that he wants the Philippines to be great again. Sounds familiar,
Oh, yeah,
right?
well, yeah, here we go. Yeah, he'll pull that sounds, yes. Like I said, they all sound familiar.
So you wrote here too that, and I'm going to read something from your book. In quotes, that Duterte said this: Hitler massacred 3 million Jews, he once said. Now there is 3 million drug addicts. I'd be happy to slaughter them. His language was false. You're right, Hitler murdered 6 million Jews, and the presence of 3 million drug addicts in the Philippines was unlikely. Incendiary, but his statement took off on Facebook and social media, which opens up to what I was going to ask you. You've been very critical of social media in the book, especially Facebook.
Yeah.
Just to give everybody an idea here, you know, we're always on our phones. I was about to say, my phones are on me somewhere. We look at our phones all the time, but it doesn't compare how it is in the Philippines.
No.
Just give them an idea of like how big is Facebook and how big is the use of social media and the internet among Filipinos.
I mean, so before social media, Filipinos spent the most time texting, SMS, short messages, and our kind of like our second people power was organized through texts. But at a certain period of time, a few years back, we hit 100% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook. Facebook really is our internet. And as of January 2021, it had been 6 years in a row where Filipinos spent the most time online and on social media globally. This is from Hootsuite and We Are Social, those numbers. You know, I think of the Philippines as like, if you're doing genetic research and you want to have quick generations, you use fruit flies, Drosophila, right? So the Philippines is like the fruit flies if you want to test anything that has to do with social media.
So knowing all that, of how much Filipinos digest Facebook and Twitter and everything else, is it fair to say that it makes Filipinos or the country ripe for misuse or for the rise of, what do you call them, click account camps?
So the other thing that in the Philippines is that there's kind of like this homegrown industry that was connected to fraud. Hotmail, when there was a lot of email fraud, right? Up until it was controlled, a lot of those false accounts, those were coming from the Philippines. Phone verified accounts, accounts on social media. So that would be the most recent one. But Hotmail, online fraud, all of these things. Actually, even there was one point where coronavirus disinformation was coming out, and the doctor here in the United States that was named had his office in the Philippines. It's very, we had links to everything that was kind of bad on the internet. But one of the things that did come out of this was that we became a testing ground, and this is what the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower called us. He said that we were the petri dish. They tested tactics of mass manipulation in the Philippines, Nigeria, countries like ours where law and order is weak, they can get away with it. And then if it worked, they poured it, that's the word he used, they ported it over to you. So, I mean, actually, the two biggest stories of my career had to do with how attacks against America were being tested in the Philippines. And the first one was 9/11. You know, when the plane crashed into the World Trade Center, it was a memory for me because I remembered reading an interrogation report of the guy who was probably the first pilot recruited by Al-Qaeda. He had been arrested in the Philippines in 1995. And at that point, when 9/11 happened, he was in a federal prison in the United States. His name was Abdul Hakim Murad. And he was working with Ramzi Youssef, you know, the guy who did the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. They didn't bring it down then, but his uncle, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the architect of 9/11, they were all in the Philippines. So when Ramzi Youssef failed the truck bombing, he moved to the Philippines to train the Abu Sayyaf, see how we're all connected. And then his uncle came around 1994, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, that first pilot, the Abdul Hakim Murad, came, they created a cell there. In 1995, they had a plot to assassinate Bill Clinton because he was coming to the Philippines to assassinate the Pope. And then they had these strange plots, right? One was to hijack planes and crash them into buildings, and it named the buildings World Trade Center, Pentagon, Transamerica in San Francisco, and a bunch of other buildings and then other plots, like a liquid bomb plot. If you remember in 2002, Richard Reed in London, he was the liquid bomb plot. It created a mess of all the airlines. They tested this, the liquid bomb. They carried it out, and it was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi Youssef who got it through airport security on the shoe. This is why the Philippines? Because we have the exact same security system that the United States has. So they figured out that there was a 2-inch gap. They carried it through. They created the liquid bomb plot, inserted it at the bottom of a seat of a Philippine Airlines flight going to Japan, and ignited it, right? The businessman who was sitting on that seat died. So to see it again in 2002, it was tested in the Philippines. I'm sorry I brought you to 9/11 because it was quite pivotal, but that was the first time where these tactics were tested in the Philippines. And then to see information operations, information warfare, again, Cambridge Analytica is the perfect example. The country with the most number of compromised accounts on Facebook is America, you. The country with the second most number of compromised accounts was the Philippines.
You mentioned that disinformation became big business.
Yeah.
Let me read something again from your book here. What we were seeing was a kind of asymmetrical warfare online, except in this case, it was Goliath using the tactics of David. It was the platforms and larger powers using the surreptitious tactics of a rebel group. So it's interesting that it's very ground roots, but it was a very maybe rebel-like, maybe you would see on Star Wars, but it was really taken on a greater level.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. To me, part of the reason we had set up Rappler was in 2009, we watched the Arab Spring, right? And it was it was all the disparate groups fighting for their freedom, and social media was a tool for that. Well, after the Arab Spring, governments realized they could do the same thing. And so they exploited these same tools, and with power and money that they had, that's where it was asymmetrical power, but it's the Goliath. So what happens to the Davids? We're still trying to figure that out.
So as we mentioned earlier, very critical of Facebook and a lot of the social media there. You met with them too and kind of warned them. Let me read one more thing. You wrote, "I believe that Facebook represents one of the gravest threats to democracies around the world. And I am amazed that we have allowed our freedoms to be taken away by technology companies' greed for growth and revenues." You presented the facts to Facebook executives, even Mark Zuckerberg. How did they respond to you? Or did they do anything?
Well, when I started getting 90 hate messages per hour, I was told I should report it. 90 per hour, I was like, there aren't enough hours in the day. Am I working for you? So how did they respond? I think we were alpha partners, essentially alpha partners of Facebook. We knew Facebook better in the Philippines than Facebook did, right?
Because you harnessed the power of Facebook at the beginning, right?
I was the truest of true believers, and I still believe that technology could help jumpstart development, right? It's the design of the social media platforms that is creating the cascading failures that we're seeing today. You could change the design. The companies won't make us much money, but how much money is enough to destroy the very foundations, the very systems that gave birth to you, right? So look, everything in the book is fact-based, it is evidence-based. If you want the data, I can give them to you. I wrote 400 pages and my editor chopped it in half. Because he said, do you want them to know everything you know, or do you want them to read it from cover to cover? So, but I have the data. Please tell me, it is there. There are elements there. What we saw was that there was a dramatic sea change around 2014. And that was around the time when, what happened in the real world. Russia began seeding meta-narratives that led to the annexation of Crimea. Those same meta-narratives are the ones that were used earlier this year when Putin decided to invade Ukraine itself. It was also 2014 was the time when our president today, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., began information operations to rehabilitate the name of Marcos, turning Marcos from a pariah to a hero. If you don't remember, the People Power Revolt in 1986, 36 years before we elected our president Marcos today. So 36 years before, People Power sparked these movements for democracy everywhere around the world, because 87, it was Korea, 88, it was Myanmar. We know where Myanmar is today, down to like the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, where Václav Havel thanked the Filipino people. So in 1986, Ferdinand Marcos had ended nearly 21 years of rule and had been accused of stealing $10 billion US in 1986 dollars. So anyway, so 2014 was when the information operations to change history began. It's quite successful. And the other thing that happened in 2014 was the beginning of instant articles on Facebook. Because this is deeply connected. And by 2014, American news organizations were going onto instant articles. 2015 was when other parts of the world, there were 4 news organizations from the Philippines that Facebook invited. We're still partners with Facebook. I think they see me as a frenemy. I hope, right? We're still partners, because I do think that social media is part of our future. It just has to evolve. So when they did that, though, they brought news on board. They didn't change the algorithms of amplification. So all of a sudden, the facts, which when news groups were the gatekeepers, we actually were responsible for the public sphere, right? And we were held accountable for it. When technology took over around 2014, it abdicated responsibility for the public sphere, and it did a lot more. For one, it didn't distinguish lies from facts. And because the goal is to keep you scrolling, it's an attention economy, lies actually spread faster than facts. And then if you infuse it with fear, anger, hate, us against them, or what Viktor Orban in Hungary calls white replacement theory, then you stay longer, right? That's the business model that we didn't have a name for. It's, Shoshana Zuboff, a Harvard emeritus professor, wrote this book in 2019. She coined surveillance capitalism. I'll do one last thing, just in case you don't, right? Like, for every post you put on Facebook, and you can use this on any social media, machine learning comes in and builds a model of you that knows you better than you know yourself. So every user has a model. Model sounds okay, but replace that word with clone, right? So machine learning comes in and clones us, our private thoughts, our fears, and then the company says, because we cloned you, we own your clone. And artificial intelligence comes in and takes all of our clones, and this is the motherlode database that is used for micro-targeting. Micro-targeting is not the same thing as advertising. Advertising, we see the same thing, right? But micro-targeting takes your weakest moment, your weakest point to a message, and then feeds you that message, but gets paid to do it. Right? So it's almost like Roswell, like I tell him my deepest, darkest secret, then he'll go to you without me knowing and tell you, I got Maria's secret, who'll pay me the most for that? And then he targets it, he sends it to me. That's surveillance capitalism. And the other abdication of responsibility for this is our governments, democratic governments, and I would say the US government because these were American companies. In this theater, if you were to yell fire and there's not a fire, there are consequences. There are building rules. Oh, well, not the Library of Congress. This is much bigger than this. But there are laws for building codes, right? There are laws for pharmaceutical companies. Imagine if a pharmaceutical company can come here and give this. I'll try drug A and I'll try drug B for over here. Oh, drug B killed you guys. We're sorry. That's what is happening online. And we know that genocide has happened in Myanmar, enabled by social media. This is by Facebook. I even like pull back a little bit, you know, because this is what the UN found, and it is what Meta, what Facebook itself found. I will stop my rant.
So I was going to ask, you mentioned both Duterte and Marcos. I guess what baffles me a lot is we are all familiar with the tactics that Duterte used. It's been used by other leaders and other people who ran for office around the world. I won't mention names.
You can.
Then Marcos used the same tactics and nothing, you know, it worked again. It makes you feel a little hopeless and helpless almost of what is being done if we know what the problem is, but it keeps on happening. So it's what's happening in the Philippines clearly is a warning of what could be happening in other democracies.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is because, let me give the upside. There is an upside in this, right? The technology that we are using today has actually shown that human beings have a lot more in common than we have differences. That, this is the hard part, right? It's optimistic, but it's also not. That we can be manipulated in exactly the same way, regardless of culture, language, and history. And that is through our amygdala. A scientist, a biologist from Harvard said this, and he studies emergent behavior in ants. Emergent behavior is how does a species behave as a whole? So the individual parts are consumed in the species. And he said, this is E.O. Wilson, he said that the greatest crisis we're facing is our Paleolithic emotions, our medieval institutions, and our godlike technology. This is the problem we're facing because in the end, the March of Folly, did you guys read Barbara Tuchman's book? The March of Folly, the repeat of history, oftentimes connects to our own, the weaknesses in our biology. And this has figured this out really well. And it's gotten worse, right? TikTok is worse than the American companies. Anyway, let me not go there. But, but, but this is why we repeat the cycles. It is power and money. And I do lay this out in the book. And how do we break the cycle? That's also in the book.
So there's a lot to digest in the book, actually. So I was mentioning, like, what could the average person do if you're feeling hopeless or helpless? What can we do? There's a whole chapter in your book titled "Don't Become a Monster." To fight a monster, I'll let you read that part, but that seems to be easier said than done. So what can we do, whether you're here in America or you're in the Philippines or you're in some other country? What could be done to curtail all this?
So the first part is don't bury your head in the sand. Because, and this you're seeing, the latest Pew Global Attitude Survey just said that you're shying away from news. It's too much bad news. When you do that, you abdicate your power, right? Because then you give up. So let me respond quickly to your question. The solution is actually, in the long term, it is education. In the medium term, it is legislation. And then in the actual short term, it's just us. This means we have to stop from becoming users and consumers, very passive, to citizens who try to figure out what civic engagement looks like in the age of exponential lies, in the age of a behavior modification system you carry in your pocket. You know, alcohol, there's an age when you can drink alcohol. Why do we let our kids get this?
During the Duterte administration, you were almost declared like public enemy number one.
Yeah, that's a familiar phrase.
There are so many cases that they filed against you. They attempted so many times to arrest you. I think you tell us how many cases are against you right now. Where does it stand? How are you doing? What happens when you get home?
It was methodology, so you can see and you can connect it with what you're living through. First, it's online attacks, bottom up, lots of lies. When you say a lie 1,000,000 times, it becomes a fact in this information ecosystem, right? So the meta-narrative that was seeded for journalists, for me, is journalist equals criminal. You say that 1,000,000 times, you pound it, astroturfing. It's like a manufactured reality. And then a year later, it came top down from President Duterte himself. He attacked Rappler and me. And he didn't do it in a press conference. He did it in his State of the Nation address, where we were live.
That's the equivalent of the State of the Union.
The State of the Union, right? So we were live, and when he said that, our newsroom is very open, and I just looked at my co-founders, and I messaged to them what I was going to tweet, and I immediately tweeted, "Mr. President, you're wrong." And then a week later, we got our first subpoena, and then 14 investigations, 14 cases, 11 cases. Then slowly it began to go down. In January 2018, we got our first threat of shutdown. And then within 4 months, we dropped 49% of our advertising revenue. We were supposed to have gone bankrupt by the end of 2018. But, Nietzsche's also right. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so we found a sustainable business model that prepared us in a strange way for the pandemic lockdown. Anyway, so what happened? 2019, I just kept getting arrested. In 2019, the Philippines issued 10 arrest warrants in less than 2 years. And there was like a horrible moment when it was the second time I was getting arrested in 6 weeks. And I kept thinking, God, this is so disruptive to work. You have to laugh because it's a little bit crazy. In order to be here today, I have to ask for court permission, for court approval. I have to give the flights that I'm on. And if I'm not on it, I could get arrested, or I have to let the courts know beforehand. So that's what I mean, you really, like before, when I could get on a flight without having to ask anyone's permission, I kind of took it for granted. And I try very hard not to have Stockholm syndrome now when I get permission to travel, But it's a very different time. And that's why, and I'll be serious, that's why when I ask you to think about what you would sacrifice, this is the moment. This is the time when if we don't take the right steps forward, we can lose so much.
How do you, I mean, that is just frightening and maddening all at the same time. How do you stay strong through this, or through those years? When there's a constant threat of you being picked up and arrested, and I'm just reading, you'll read in the book what President Duterte did to some of his enemies. It must have been just absolutely numbingly scary I don't know how you continued. And it was easy for you to, many people probably told you to stay in the States.
No, I mean, strangely, there were a lot of lessons I learned when I was much younger and as an immigrant kid in the US. No, you have to laugh. That's the first, I think. But the second thing is I learned to embrace my fear. And I learned this when I first came, because you are your own worst enemy, and fear is your own worst enemy. I learned this in conflict reporting. So the key part is whatever it is you're most afraid of, you have to like hold it, embrace it, imagine it, and then figure out what you would do. And because I had Rappler, I go one step further. I think of the worst case scenarios, and then we workflow it, and we drill it. So a shutdown, for example, right? We drill it every quarter. And sometimes we make mistakes, because at one point, these men burst into the office, and then we had a new social media manager, and he puts it live on our Facebook page that has like 5 million followers, and then we had to apologize, but that's what it is, right? Whatever it is you are most afraid of, conquer it. You take the sting out so that we can keep doing our jobs. In the end, the Damocles sword is hung over our heads to prevent us from doing our jobs. And I think I get great satisfaction when I see Rappler doing excellent accountability journalism, to hold power to account. We continue with investigative journalism. I certainly haven't stopped speaking. And I wrote a book, 5 a.m. wake-ups. This is what it was. And I think the other reason I wrote it was because it is this moment in time. And it is not just the Philippines, it's not just the United States, although where you go, you will drag us with you. Where you go, the world will most likely go, because this will be a tipping point. We figured this out, right? We looked at the number of elections. So imagine, if you don't have integrity of facts, which we don't, I became a journalist because information is power. But because our information ecosystem prioritizes the spread of lies, if you don't have integrity of facts, how do we have integrity of elections? We really don't, because this is in the Nobel lecture. I called it a behavior modification system, and we're Pavlov's dogs. We're being A/B tested. We're being given drugs, and oh, sorry, that didn't work for you. You died. So if you don't have integrity of elections, that means every election is kind of a death by 1,000 cuts a little bit. And I know many of you think the midterms was better than you expected, but it's still death by 1,000 cuts, because the mother problem, the root problem, which is the information ecosystem, when it rewards a liar. Think about your families, right? If you have kids, and you tell your children, lie all the time. I'll keep rewarding you if you lie. That is our information ecosystem today. So, sorry, 60% of the world today now lives under autocrats, autocracy. And the number of democracies have now been rolled back to 1989 levels. And it will be, the tipping point when you look at every country is 2024. And there's 3 major elections that we are looking at. It is Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim population, where the front runner in Indonesia's elections is the son-in-law of former President Suharto. Suharto was in power for almost 32 years. I covered the end of his, when he lost power. And Indonesia went from having one leader for almost 32 years to having a new president every year. And they were so traumatized by so much change that there was a kind of a yearning for stability of a strong man, right? So this is a cycle we have globally. The second is India, the world's largest democracy. And then the third, the most critical one, is you. Where are you going to go? That question, is for you, because you'll take us with you.
Before we take questions from the audience, let me ask you one more question. In 2021, you were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And as a Filipino American, I'm very proud to be sharing the stage with you. What does this prize mean for you, the Filipino people, and most importantly, fellow journalists?
In Oslo, there's an Edward Munch exhibit, and I'm still doing the scream. It's still, I mean, for Rappler, it meant, I think that night, we only had 30 minutes together, and we were on Zoom. Like when the announcement happened, I had 3 computers and 2 cell phones, and they all went off. And the 30 minutes with Rappler, everybody was laughing and crying, because in many ways, we have PTSD, It's like when you get pounded so much, you don't know whether you're doing the right thing, whether you're being foolish. And in many ways, it proved to us that doing the right thing is the right thing. It also, I think it was for every journalist around the world. You may always blame the journalist, but in general, given the ecosystem, the journalists have done our jobs. It's almost like oftentimes it feels like there's a giant dam that's about to fall, and we're just holding it with our fingers, and we're waiting for it to fall. So my friends in international news organizations all around the world, journalists have been under attack, and that was a recognition that, hey, you're not alone. The other part, I think, last year was journalists. This year, the Norwegian Nobel Committee gave the Nobel Peace Prize to civil society, to Russia, Belarus, Ukraine. And those are the 2 parts that need to work together to figure out what civic engagement, what democracy needs today. So the Peace Prize is on the go.
We could talk all night here. So I know many of you are anxious to ask Maria some questions. So if you don't mind raising your hands, we'll have a microphone come down to you.
Yay, I get to see you.
Let's start over there where Clay is.
Thank you. Ann Wilcox, could you talk a little bit about how you use government information that might be leaked to you, that you then publish? Julian Assange has been in prison for this, and 5 major sources just said that, we published the information he gave.
Yeah, so what I do, and I've actually gone through DC, a lot of my earlier reporting, especially the ones on terrorism. So after 9/11, I did most of the reporting out of Southeast Asia and South Asia. You have sources, you get documents. There's a period of time I flew through DC on my way to New York, and I was stopped, and there were classified documents in my luggage. And I thought, look, this is how different it would be, right? I think if I came through today, that was like 2001, 2002. They called CNN, and then I got on the plane to New York. Classified information, like everything else, needs A, to be verified. B, you need to make sure that you're accountable to everyone, including the public and the sources that you have. And that's how we would use the information. That's my first book uses largely classified documents. But in terms of today, the world has gotten, 3 things have gotten conflated, and they're all separate problems. The first one is really like, what's the role of privacy and secrecy? Where is the line between national concerns and individual concerns? And what we've seen now is, I think you've seen Edward Snowden, Julian Assange is another one, and part of it is the technology. In the old days, my old days, we would sift through, I would get hundreds of classified documents, and none of it would get released until I have gone through it, my editor has gone through it. We went through an entire cache of videotapes from Osama bin Laden's headquarters, his HQ. And CNN had 4 or 5 of us working on this, in addition to a lot of team behind the scenes cataloging this. That kind of scrutiny hasn't been there now, given this massive data troves. The closest we come to is like the ICIJ, where we do consortiums, like the papers that have come out. And that is not a direct public dump, right? So you handle it very securely, you're aware of the dangers of it, and you tell the story.
Let's do a new one. Let's get someone on this side. How about that woman over there? There you go.
Sylvia Cabas, born in Cebu City. Thank you so much for your insights. And I want to ask a question about a very important topic, Filipino food. Every 5 to 10 years, Filipino food is rediscovered. And I'd really like to hear your thoughts on why Filipino cuisine has not been as ingrained in American culture like Vietnamese food and Thai food. Thank you.
You're the chef now. So.
I know, you have to help me with that. I think part of it is, in many ways, Filipinos, we assimilate. Like, again, please disagree with me. These are based on my own experiences. And you'll see, like, when I wrote in the book, it was, I wanted to understand the culture I was walking into. But let me answer about the Filipino food. We need to do this in a more concerted way.
We need to have a taste test.
I know.
Let's do some. This gentleman over here in a tie. Oh, you got him. Okay. Uh-oh.
Hi, good evening, Maria. It's nice to see you in Washington, D.C. I'm Dina De Leon from the an LM student from Georgetown University.
Yeah,
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So it has been tough fighting the dictator back in the Philippines. The numbers vary. Some say it's 29,000. According to the Philippine National Police, around 29,000 died during the drug war. Some say it's 27,000. But the most important thing is maybe around 30,000 people died. And what keeps me up at night until now is, how do we get justice for these 30,000 people? And I don't think we can do something about it, or the prospects are not very positive in light of the new administration. So my question would be, what would be the role of, number one, the media to make sure that the stories of these 30,000 people will not be forgotten? Second, what would be the role of maybe the international community in making sure that someday, somehow, we'll be able to make sure that justice will be served on these 30,000 people? And maybe what is the role of the Filipino people to preserve the story? Because I don't think we would be able to see prosecution of people in the next 6 years.
My gosh, ang galing. Unang-una, maraming salamat. Thank you, I said thank you for that, and it's a great question. I think, so first is the number of people dead who died in this brutal drug war is the first casualty in the Philippines battle for facts. Because if you ask, the Philippine National Police, they had rolled back the numbers in 2020 it went up to 7,000, then it rolled back to 2,000. That's of 2017, January 2017. Then in December 2018, our commission, the head of the Commission on Human Rights, came out with a 27,000 people killed. But then the police was saying it was like 5,000. And we couldn't, the church even got involved in this, where, it was we were trying to figure out parish by parish. Imagine doing this in America, right? Parish by parish, has anyone died in your community? And we still don't have the exact numbers. Having said that, this is part of, I think, why the government attacked us, and part of the reason we got awards. Awards always come with a tax. We did a series called the Impunity Series, where we made those numbers people. We told their stories, and it is incredibly hard. The families are afraid to ask because they get targeted. We know now the International Criminal Court is moving forward in its investigation of former President Duterte, but under President Marcos, it's unclear whether they will get any help, right? I don't know what will happen, but let me put it in the context of what is happening around the world, right? The investigation of war crimes in the Ukraine, the killings. It's a really, really bad is an understatement for what our world is going through right now. You know, if the world is a startup, we're in the valley of death, and we have to come out of it. And I guess that's part of the reason. Yes, I care about the Philippines. I care about justice. The first thing that needs to happen is Filipinos must ask for it. But power and money gets in the way. That's the first. The second is overseas diaspora. There are 10 to 12 million Filipinos overseas. The Philippines' largest overseas source of revenue is our people who send home the money. You have tremendous power. Asking for justice will help and is not as dangerous for you. But the last part is that let's look at this in context of what the world is going through. And when we pull it that way, because I look at Mexico, I look at Myanmar, I look at India, and it doesn't diminish what we are going through, but it is, how do we get a sense of justice in this fragmented world? Our institutions are moving too slowly, and that's part of what I'm hoping. I mean, you'll see in the book, I think technology is going to be part of the solution. It has to be. And that's, I'll end with there, right? The three pillars. These were the three pillars of Rappler, and these are the three pillars of a solution, I think, for the future. Technology, the demon and the angel, has to be part of the solution. Journalism, which is an antidote to tyranny, which gives you the facts, right? We're not influencers, we're journalists. And the last part is community. The community has the power. We will risk everything as journalists to give you the news, but please listen and watch.
We have time for just one more question here. Well, let's pick from this side. How about this young woman over here that's in the striped sweater?
Hi, Maria. I'm Hannah Dormido. I'm a Filipino reporter based in DC. And just the context, I used to work in Hong Kong, and I messaged you because I was being harassed because people thought I worked for Rappler because I was a Filipino journalist. And
I'm sorry.
No, and I told you, and I messaged you, and I said, you must be doing something good back home because I'm in Hong Kong and I'm being harassed. And it's not a good thing, but it's a nod to what you're doing. And the question is, I am far removed from the Philippines and covering the Philippines, but I am harassed on Facebook and stuff.
Yeah.
How do you keep the morale in the newsroom of like young journalists? Like, how do you tell them to like keep showing up every day, seeing bodies out on the streets every day? That gets to you as a reporter. So how do you keep your journalists like to show up every day?
Well, you should have come into our newsroom. You would feel much, much better. But you know, so of course, China was the other big one. I was trying to think of other places around the world, right, that we need to look at. But how did we do it? It wasn't us. The mission of journalism is even more important today than it has ever been. And then what happened when we came under attack, I kind of did like a meeting like this. There weren't as many people, but you know, we had a General Assembly shortly after the government first tried to shut us down. And this was before we did a press conference to rebut what the charges were. And I told our folks, we're about 100 people in Rappler. We're 63% women, not by design. You know, we look for men all the time. And the median age is 23 years old. We're very young, but that, by the way, is the median age of the Philippines, so we're representative of the Philippines. And when this shutdown, you know, when the threat of shutdown happened, I knew that I'm in charge of, you know, I know their parents will be worried. I know they may be worried. So we, in our General Assembly, I just said, we're moving into a different place and we're going to be fighting this. But you know, if you're uncomfortable, if you are afraid or your parents don't want you to be here, let us know and we will help place you in another news organization. Not one journalist took it, not one. And what happened as we came under attack is everyone threw everything in, 150% effort. It is exhausting. And you know, the founders were, I'm 59, so I don't mind telling you how old I am. You know, we're in our late 50s, early 60s, but now when we founded Rappler, we were still in our 50s, you know, late 40s, early 50s. And our young 20-somethings, what they did was the mission became everything. And they would come out and work so much harder. All of the normal frictions of managing a news organization disappeared because everyone was running at their own steam. Having said that, the attacks online were exponential. And so by August 2016, we started feeling that. By October 2016, I offered counseling because we have a young team and we didn't know what we were going through. But what we found out by October 2016, the counselors didn't know how to counsel us, right? Because it was so new. How do you deal with exponential attacks on social media? We didn't really talk about this, but information operations, that's very different from, you know, free speech. Information operations uses the bullet, that's the gun, and the bullet is disinformation, right? And that is pounded at you to shut you up, to tear your credibility down. So what we did in 2016 was we helped it would have been the psychologists who were trying to help us. We connected them with DART. It was train the trainers, and then we did counseling for our folks who wanted it. And then we also did our own QRT, quick reaction team. If you're the one being attacked, you don't respond. The rest of our team does. And this is what we have to do, right? It's person to person. It's person to person defense of our democracy.
Well, before we go, as I mentioned earlier, the LOC, Asian American Staff Association, helped us with this program, so we have something for you. And, oops.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone for joining us this Saturday night. Maraming salamat to Maria. Maria will be signing books outside. I hope you could buy the book, and we'll see you out there. Thank you again for coming out, and happy holidays.
Thank you.